A win for religious liberty. The vice president confirms a new ambassador who will defend freedom to worship abroad. World stage. The president lands in Davos, Switzerland, but he's talking Russia. We have the latest. Safe homecoming? The UN has a warning as Rohingya Muslims prepare to return to Myanmar. And monkey business. The Vatican reacts after scientists in China successfully clone the first primates. On EWTN News Nightly for Thursday, January 25th, 2018. Good evening from Washington, D.C., and thank you to those of you joining us from around the world for news from a Catholic perspective. I'm Lauren Ashburn. The United States gains a new ambassador at large for international religious freedom, with some last-minute help from the vice president. Correspondent Jason Calvi was on Capitol Hill for the exciting news. Jason.
Good evening, Lauren. Kansas Governor Sam Brownback just squeaked by. He'll now be tasked with monitoring worldwide religious persecution and promoting religious freedom in U.S. foreign policy, but it wouldn't have been possible without the intervention of the vice president.
The clerk will report the motion to invoke cloture.
Cloture motion. We, the undersigned senators, do hereby move to bring to a close debate on the nomination of Samuel Dale Brownback.
Tense minutes on the Senate floor with the nomination of the religious freedom ambassador hanging in limbo.
On this vote, the yeas are 49, the nays are 49.
Republican leaders summoned the vice president to break the tie on a procedural vote. And then again, 2.5 hours later, on the final confirmation vote.
The vice president votes in the affirmative, and the nomination is confirmed.
2 Republicans were absent, Senators John McCain and Bob Corker, and Democrats united in opposing the nomination.
I was deeply disturbed that when pressed during his confirmation hearing,
Democrats pointing to Brownback's October confirmation hearing.
Is there any circumstance under which criminalizing, imprisoning, or executing somebody based on their LGBT status could be deemed acceptable because somebody asserts that they are religiously motivated in doing so?
I don't know what that would be, in what circumstance.
But Republican Ted Cruz of Texas tells me Brownback will be excellent.
The position is a vitally important position. It's a position charged with protecting religious liberty. It's a position charged with speaking out for those who are persecuted because of their faith. I think Governor Brownback will do an excellent job.
President Trump nominated Brownback back in July.
At the rate we're going, we will get everybody confirmed in about 11 years, and that's not acceptable.
Sam Brownback says he'll step down as Kansas governor next Wednesday. The state's lieutenant governor will then take his place. We're told to expect Brownback's swearing in as religious freedom ambassador within a month. Lauren?
Vice President Pence has been called to break a number of these ties. How does he compare with other vice presidents?
As president of the Senate, Pence has broken 8 ties, including the 2 for Brownback yesterday. Now, that puts him even with Vice Presidents Nixon, Cheney, and Barkley, but Vice President Pence still has another 3 years to catch up to the all-time record. That's 31, set by Vice President John Calhoun back when Andrew Jackson was president.
Yeah, searching the history books. Jason Calvi, correspondent. Thank you so much. Immediately after the Brownback nomination or confirmation, we learned the Senate will vote next week on the 20-week abortion ban. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell announced the vote on the Senate floor.
The United States is currently one of just 7 countries, just 7, including China and North Korea, that permit elective abortion after 20 weeks. It is time we began to remedy this obvious and tragic moral wrong.
Speaking to the March for Life on Friday, President Trump urged the Senate to pass the 20-week abortion ban. The House approved it in the fall. A procedural vote in the Senate is set for Monday evening. When the chamber voted on this bill in 2015, it died on a 54-42 vote. A recent Pew study shows support for legal abortion varies widely among religious groups, with Catholics falling somewhere in the middle. 48% of Catholics support abortion, while 47% are opposed, 5% undecided. The religious group most in favor of legalized abortion is Unitarian Universalist at 9 out of 10. Jehovah's Witnesses are the least in favor of it at 18%. For more on the study, including some encouraging numbers for the faithful, visit National Catholic Register at ncregister.com. BuzzFeed reports Cecile Richards is stepping down as president of Planned Parenthood, the nation's largest abortion provider. Richards has spent more than a decade in the post. She has yet to confirm the report, saying only she will discuss her future at a board meeting next week. According to the organization's annual report, Planned Parenthood performed more than 300,000 abortions last year. President Trump issues a warning from the sidelines of the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland. He threatens to withhold U.S. aid money from Palestinians unless they return to peace talks with Israel. White House correspondent Mark Irons brings us highlights from day one of the president's trip. Good evening, Mark.
Good evening, Lauren. President Trump traveled to Switzerland to convince world leaders to make economic investments in America. But today he's saying if Palestinians don't change some of their behavior, the U.S. won't invest in them.
We give them hundreds of millions of dollars in aid and support.
President Trump pressures Palestinians to come to the peace table, saying he'll cut U.S. funding if they don't.
What we want to do for them is help them. We want to create peace and save lives. And we'll see what happens.
Trump believes Palestinians disrespected the U.S. last week when they refused to meet with Vice President Mike Pence during his trip to the Middle East. The snub follows Trump's decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel, the same city that Palestinians claim as their own capital. Trump made the remarks today during his meeting with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland.
Very exciting to be here. We're very happy to be here.
The president is in Davos to preach his America First economic agenda, which he says includes a message of peace and prosperity. He hopes to lure foreign investment to the U.S.
A lot of people are coming back to the United States. We are seeing tremendous investment, and today's been a very exciting day, a very great day.
The optimism extends to President Trump's meeting with British Prime Minister Theresa May. He denies rumors they have a strained relationship.
Yeah, I just wanted to correct it, frankly, because we have great respect for everything you're doing, and we love your country. We think it's truly great.
The British government says President Donald Trump is expected to visit the UK this year. Details are being finalized. The president anticipates another full day of meetings with world leaders tomorrow. He will also give a speech before the forum in Davos wraps up. His message: when the U.S. economy grows, the global economy grows. Lauren?
White House correspondent Mark Irons, thank you. Father Philip Larray has just returned from the Swiss mountain resort. He joins us from Rome. Father, this is a meeting of major world leaders who are deciding the future of the planet. And you were there. What was your message to them?
Well, the message actually came from the Holy Father, Pope Francis. Many times the Pope has sent a message which Klaus Schwab, who organizes the World Economic Forum, uses to open these days of discussion and meetings. This year, Cardinal Peter Turkson read that address on Monday, and with that opened the World Economic Forum. And I was fortunate enough to attend because we are meeting with people there for different initiatives here in the Vatican.
What are those initiatives?
One of them has to do with the School of Business Ethics, and several people in Davos are helping us organize that and are promoting it for us. We also have a series of initiatives with the dicastery of Cardinal Peter Turkson having to do with the Laudato Si Challenge, which just took place in December, and also a new initiative to help pregnant mothers so that we understand what wellness is in order to provide health care for unborn babies. So, and other initiatives as well. Those are what we're doing.
And Laudato Si is the environmental encyclical that Pope Francis released. Tell me, what was the reaction to his message?
Some people were a little bit put off because the Pope was very demanding on them. In Davos, as you know, represented the most influential people moving the business and the industry world. And the Pope calls them to a greater sense of responsibility and a greater sense of solidarity with primarily the poor people and the marginalized of our society. Well, so his message was very demanding, and I think that a lot of other people felt that it was timely, and they are willing to help the Pope in order to progress in a humane way.
What I found interesting was it is about putting the dignity of the human person at the center of the economy. Did you get a specific reaction to that?
Yes. We need to get away from a profit-seeking economy so that making money is not the only important thing when we deal with economy and with businesses. We have to put the human person at the center so that creating opportunity and creating, shall we say, goals for human beings has to be the center of what we do as business. Therefore, we are beginning to see that a good business is actually a business that does well for everybody and not just making money.
Father Philip Luray, professor and author, just returned from Davos. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. Goodbye.
The president says he's willing to answer questions under oath in the special counsel's probe into possible Russian interference in the election. Before leaving for the World Economic Forum, the president told reporters the interview with Robert Mueller might be in 2 or 3 weeks, adding, "I'm looking forward to it." The White House says there was no collusion with the Russians nor any attempts to obstruct the FBI's investigation. 94-year-old former Secretary of State Henry Kissinger has a warning for lawmakers in testimony today before the Senate Armed Services Committee.
I think the denuclearization of North Korea must be a fundamental objective. And if it is not reached, we have to prepare ourselves for the proliferation of weapons to other countries.
Kissinger describes the current state of world affairs as unprecedented. He says ISIS has been defeated, but the big question now is what happens next in the troubled Middle East region. The Pentagon says Turkey's military push against the Kurds in Syria is not helpful and is hurting the fight against ISIS. This as the U.S. military works to prevent another war from breaking out in the Middle East. Correspondent Wyatt Goolsbee has been at the Pentagon all day. He just returned and joins us with the details. Good evening, Wyatt.
Good evening, Lauren. The Pentagon's Joint Staff Director, Lieutenant General Kenneth McKenzie, says Kurdish groups in northern Syria have been a help in the fight against ISIS, but he says the Turks see Kurdish militia as terrorists. The U.S. military commanders are working to resolve the conflict diplomatically.
We're not in a crisis. Turkey is an ally, and we're going to work with them. But this current issue, offensive, is a distraction, and we have to focus as allies on the mission at hand, and that's defeating ISIS.
Dana White and General McKenzie say they understand it's Turkey's right to defend their country, but they say moving troops into Syria isn't the way to do it. Activists say Turkey has mobilized about 10,000 troops to storm Afrin, a Syrian Kurdish enclave. General McKenzie says U.S. military commanders are talking with Turkey about creating a safe zone along the border. He also says they are tracking Turkey's movements, and at this point, the U.S. military doesn't anticipate a clash between Turkish and American troops. Lauren?
Wyatt Goolsbee reporting. Thank you, Wyatt. United Nations says it is not yet safe for Rohingya Muslims to head home. An official says the security situation inside Myanmar needs to improve before nearly 700,000 refugees can return from neighboring Bangladesh. More than half are displaced children. 10 priests, 2 nuns have been arrested in the Democratic Republic of Congo. Local news reports 200 people, probably lay Christians, were also taken into custody following protests Sunday against President Joseph Kabila. The Catholic Bishops' Conference says excessive force was used on demonstrators who were armed, quote, only with Bibles, rosaries, and branches. The head of the Vatican's Laity and Family Office says the church will highlight the evil of abortion at the World Meeting of Families in Dublin later this year.
If we believe that life begins at conception, who's going to defend the innocent, and who's going to defend the unborn child, and who's going to speak up for that?
Abortion currently is illegal in Ireland. A vote to relax the law is expected this summer. The Family Conference also will address sex abuse prevention. Coming up, the doomsday clock makes a move. And faith and science The Vatican makes a plea to scientists after the successful cloning of 2 monkeys in China. A panel of scientists are worrying the world is closer than ever to a so-called doomsday scenario. The Bulletin of Atomic Scientists tracks the threat posed by nuclear weapons. Today, they moved the clock to 2 minutes to midnight. It has not been this close to midnight since 1953, when the U.S. and Soviet Union were in a nuclear arms race. Chinese scientists announced the cloning of 2 healthy monkeys. It is the first successful experiment with primates. Monkeys are biologically more like humans than other lab animals. The scientists say that while it is now possible in principle to clone humans, they have no intention of doing that. Joining us to help us understand the ethics of this development, Dr. David Prentice, Vice President of the Charlotte Lozier Institute. That's a research group focused on life issues. He is also an adjunct professor of molecular genetics at the JP2 Institute at the Catholic University of America. Welcome to the program, sir.
Thank you, Lauren.
How can this not bring us one step closer to human cloning?
It does. It really does. And let's back up and talk about what they actually did first. They not only cloned these monkeys, because you always start with an embryo when you create a clone, but they gestated them to birth. That's the real leap forward that they have made here. And it's frightening in a sense because if we hark back 20 years to Dolly the cloned sheep, this is exactly how mammalian cloning started. These 2 monkeys were cloned from fetal monkey cells rather than an adult cell. Dolly was a follow-up actually of lambs cloned by fetal sheep cells. And so it brings us very much closer because, as you note, monkeys are very close biologically to humans. The continued statements by the scientists that they don't intend to clone humans is simply false. They already have cloned human embryos.
The scientists say they're going to create and use the genetically identical monkeys for medical research. But what's going to stop rogue researchers or rogue nations from cloning humans?
Nothing really to stop them. And I question this idea that cloned monkeys are going to be all that useful for medical research. Most scientists now have stopped using primates in their research. It's not required for drug discovery and so on. Instead, this is practicing that technique to eventually be able to use it to clone and gestate to birth cloned humans.
We have that picture of Dolly. It was on the cover, the Dolly the sheep, who was cloned in 1996. Let's put it up there. It was on that cover. Scientists generally, though, do oppose cloning humans, although we are continuing to clone animals, and that banning human cloning for ethical reasons could be problematic. The Vatican issued a statement today basically saying that they are concerned about the risks of this new technology. Will church warnings have any impact?
Well, they should. People should be looking to the ethical problems of this. Biologically, it's not a very good way to reproduce individuals, but ethically, not trying to make light of it, but you're monkeying around with life. You're creating new life, and you're actually designing it to have a certain genome. That's what cloning is, copying the genome of another person to birth this new individual. In point of fact, some of these scientists who have claimed that they don't want born cloned humans have already cloned human embryos and are working on techniques to make 3-parent human embryos and genetically edited human embryos. Again, playing around with life and trying to be the designer.
I think we could talk about this for a long time, but that is all the time we have. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. David Prentice, Vice President of the Charlotte Lozier Institute. Tonight on EWTN Pro-Life Weekly, Catherine Zeltner talks to White House advisor Mercedes Schlapp about the president's pro-life commitments.
I think it's wonderful to see the president embracing the pro-life community in the way that he has, and talking about just the atrocities of where the abortion industry has gone.
You can see Catherine's entire interview tonight at 10 p.m. Eastern on EWTN. Pro-Life Weekly re-airs Sunday morning at 10. Up next, a holy visit. We discuss the Pope's trip to a Ukrainian Greek Catholic church. And facelift for a favorite. An icon the Holy Father often visits will be on display. Pope Francis will visit the Ukrainian Greek Catholic community this weekend when he goes to Rome's Basilica of St. Sophia. It was the mother church for Ukrainian Catholics for decades. Vatican correspondent Juliette Lindley sits down in an exclusive interview with the major archbishop of the Ukrainian church.
Beatitude, thank you so much for joining us. We're here in this magnificent Basilica of St. Sophia in Rome. How significant is it for you that Pope Francis is coming here in a few days?
We are very excited. Pope is also a bishop of Rome, so he's supposed to visit Roman parishes, his flock. And today we have a very significant presence of the Ukrainian immigrants here in Italy. And of course, here in this basilica, we have very vibrant Ukrainian parish community. So Pope is coming to visit his people.
This was the mother church for many years. How bad is the situation for Ukrainian Greek Catholics at the moment? And do you ever fear that it might have to return to being the mother church?
We have our parishes, our faithfuls, in the occupied territory of Ukraine. 7% of Ukraine territory is occupied by the Russian military forces. But we are present on that territory, trying to witness to Christ through the religious services, but also the charitable work for those who are in need.
What would you specifically like to see the Holy See, the Holy Father, doing specifically to try and find a solution in your country?
2 years ago, Pope Francis started a special charitable mission in Ukraine, known as a mission Pope for Ukraine. Pope himself donated 5 million euro in order to help to those who are in need. But also he started a special collection in the Catholic parishes in Europe to collect money in order to help to those people who suffer a war. So Holy Father is our voice, he's our protector, but also he is one who is with us in this, I would say, very tragic and difficult moment of our history. What do we need right now? It's a dialogue, authentic, peaceful dialogue, trying to protect a life and integrity of human life.
Thank you so much.
May God bless you and all those who listen to us.
Absolutely, thank you.
Bishops in Germany say they've debated tweaking the translation of the Lord's Prayer, but they're leaving it unchanged. Pope Francis recently said the phrase, "Lead us not into temptation," is better translated as, "Don't let me fall into temptation." The Holy Father recently allowed individual bishops' conferences greater leeway in translating liturgical texts. And finally tonight, an icon beloved by Pope Francis will look a little different when he sees it this Sunday. Take a look at this. The Vatican has released photos of the newly restored image of Our Lady. If I get this wrong, I don't want emails. Salus Populi Romani. Did I do it right? Or Salvation of the People of Rome. It is inside St. Mary Major Basilica. The Holy Father prays in front of it before and after every foreign trip. It is just beautiful. You can actually see it now. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, to all of you around the world, thank you for watching. I'm Lauren Ashburn. We'll be back tomorrow with more news from a Catholic perspective. Good night, and God bless you.